first, like, biggest, most significant experience with loss was not a death related loss. When I was in high school, we found out some pretty shocking news about my father,
Okay.
and it was an abrupt end to that relationship as we
Oh.
knew it, with no warning signs. So that was kind of like a very sudden traumatic loss, grieving a lot of different things. The future we thought we were going to
Yeah.
have. He's not going to be walking me down the aisle, and
Oh.
he's not moving me to college, and all these sorts of things. Since becoming a mother and having a traumatic birth experience and almost losing our daughter. And I don't like to say this part out loud, but I'll put that in there too. My life also being at risk. I had a placental
Oh
abruption.
my.
Thank goodness they got me into an emergency cesarean and we were both okay.
Yeah.
We lost my brother Sean 33 years ago in a NICU. His twin brother, my brother Ryan, is here with us today and survived.
Wow.
So there's been loss in my family
No
and in my
kidding.
life.
Welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I'm your host, grief and soul purpose coach and fellow griever, Tara Accardo. Lauren, welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I genuinely have been looking forward to this conversation for so long. I know we were just joking right before we hopped on that hi to working moms with the kids, with everything. Like, it's a miracle we got this on the calendar, but I'm so proud of us. And this is going to be such a beautiful and impactful conversation. One of the reasons that we've been connected through this beautiful kind of grief community that we're a part of, but one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was because I, unfortunately, can relate to the work that you do in having been through a very traumatic birth experience and a also traumatic NICU experience myself and my own journey. I've talked about that on the podcast before, but it just touched me so much, the work that you do. And it's important to talk about and to make sure women and partners as well are well supported and feel, that they have the right tools to cope. So I am such a big proponent of the work that you do, and I'm so excited to get into this conversation with you.
Oh my gosh, that's just like you made my day.
Oh,
Thank you so much for saying that. And the feeling is a million times
you're
mutual.
so sweet.
Really excited to chat with you.
Thank you. Well, I love to start guest episodes off with just a little icebreaker, and I would love for you to tell everyone just like a fun fact about yourself, or things you like to maybe do in your spare time. Which I know any parent that I have on here, a lot of the times they're like, "What do I have a life outside of my kid?"
Yes.
I,
Oh
I,
my gosh,
I
that's
trip
so
so
relatable.
many people up with this question. It's so funny because they're like, "What hobbies do I have anymore?"
So I'll tell you, my go-to fun fact is that I used to teach Zumba class. I don't teach it anymore. I
Fun.
go to Zumba
Okay.
once a week, but I used to teach Zumba at my grad school. So that was super, super
So
fun.
fun.
While I was learning how to be a therapist, I was teaching Zumba.
Of all things, I love that. That's so funny. My
I love
friend
it.
recently got into Zumba actually, or maybe it's called something different. I don't know, but the just dance classes, and she is like loving it. I'm like, "Get it, girl. You whatever you can squeeze in."
So cathartic, so fun,
Yeah.
so healing in so many ways. And the first time I went back to a class after I had my little one,
Mhm.
my body was like, whoa. So I feel like there's something there. Like emotionally, it was like,
Yes.
whoa,
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah, there's something very cathartic. Just a quick sidebar here. I've been really getting more in touch with like the somatics and just in terms of grief and healing and all of the things. And as funny as people might think like Zumba is, but like literally, I did sort of a mini class recently of just some like somatic dance and like kind of trauma releasing stuff. And wow, it was eye-opening, and I realizing how much is stored in the body and things like that. So, I think a lot of people think like, "Oh, Zumba, workout, whatever," but like it is so much deeper than that. So,
Oh yeah. And we could even go there, right? Like Zumba, it's all Latin music and it's like
yeah,
you're really swinging your
so
hips and you want to talk about
soulful.
pelvic floor and yeah, everything. And
Yep.
especially if you're talking about birth trauma, it's like what is safe to move again and I have control.
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Great point. Well,
Yeah.
let's dig into all of it. So, obviously, I think a lot of us that do work in this grief space, if you will, aren't here for no reason. And so I would love to just kind of start with you telling us a little bit about your journey with loss and grief and what that looks like for you as much as you are comfortable sharing.
Yes, I so appreciate that question because it's what connects all of
Yeah.
us, right?
Yep.
Like, if we're lucky enough to live each year, if we love, we grieve. So
Yep.
I guess my first, like, biggest, most significant experience with loss was not a death related loss. When I was in high school, we found out some pretty shocking news about my father,
Okay.
and it was an abrupt end to that relationship as
Oh,
we knew it with no warning signs. So that was kind of like a very sudden traumatic loss, grieving a lot of different things. The future we thought we were going to
yeah.
have. So he's not going to be walking me down the aisle and
Oh,
he's not moving me to college and all these sorts of things. So that was really like my first significant experience with grief,
mhm.
an adult. And then I would say, right, like everybody, breakups,
Yeah.
and then, you move from one job to another, and those types of grief.
Yeah.
And more recently, since becoming a mother and having a traumatic birth experience
Mhm.
and almost losing our daughter. And I don't like to say this part out loud, but I'll put that in there too. My life also being at risk. I had a placental
Oh
abruption.
my God.
I delivered my little one,
Okay.
and thank goodness they got me into an emergency cesarean and we were both okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of processing grief in that aspect.
Mhm.
We lost my brother Sean 33 years ago in a
Oh
NICU.
my God.
His twin brother, my brother Ryan, is here with us today and survived.
Wow.
So there's been loss in my
No
family and in my
kidding.
life. Yeah.
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 I wanna just quickly thank you so much for being so vulnerable, speaking about your father, of course, we can leave it there. What I just wanted to kind of understand from you, of c of course, the death of a loved one in whatever capacity is devastating. It's heartbreaking, it's some of the worst loss we will go through. But living loss, I think, is so underrated in a way, for lack
Yeah.
of a better term, and I can relate to my it is certainly not I'm gonna never like to compare, but I'm gonna compare in this case, not to that degree, to the gravity of that. But what's interesting is in my journey of kind of like in between losing my parents, basically, which were 6 months apart, I went through a breakup with my now husband, but we were boyfriend, girlfriend at the time. And, he again, so ironic saying this now, he was someone that I saw myself marrying, right? I thought we were kinda like good, right? Looking back, I was like, "Huh, we weren't so great." But at that point, my dad hadn't yet died, but was heading in that direction. I knew that. And for some reason, I think that was less surprising and, like, shocking to me, not less devastating per se, but, like, I had ended up going to therapy for a few months around all of this, and I actually felt guilt because in those sessions, I was talking more about my breakup and that, like, living loss, if you will, than I even was around my parents' deaths, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like, I was still processing my mom's, her cancer journey was a little faster. My dad's, I guess he had prostate cancer for like 5 or 6 years at that point. I knew he was not doing well without my mom. It had begun metastasizing. I was like, well, the writing's on the wall there, like so. But it's that living loss because they're around, right? There's still almost like potential for opportunity to change that relationship, I guess. Whereas like with death, it's like
Yes.
it's very dark, but I'm just, dark humor. They're gone, they're dead, right? There's no like coming back from that in a way. So
Right.
it's just
Yeah.
very high level. What did it look like for you? And maybe, maybe still
Yeah.
presently to cope with that. Were there any particular coping mechanisms, things that you did to kind of help you
Yeah.
process all of that?
Oh, such an important question. And first and foremost, I just want to say I'm so sorry for the loss of your parents. And in such a short amount of time, my heart is really with you. And I saw your gorgeous post about their birthdays. So I just want to
Yes.
like And shout out
Thank
mom and dad.
you.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. You're awesome.
And yeah, I guess about like living loss versus the maybe potential closure is not the right word,
Mhm.
but I'll use because there's no other word I know of.
Yeah.
The closure that death could bring to a
Yeah.
relationship in the physical world as we know it. Whereas living loss, yeah, it's kind of just this thing that does feel hard for me to say, okay, that's processed. I've done the
Mhm.
work done.
Doesn't work that
It
way.
comes We're allowed to curse on here, so
Oh,
I
yeah,
won't.
girl, bring it on.
I was gonna say, like, living loss can be a real bitch because it can come up on all of the happy occasions because it's kind of like half of you, and this might be similar to bereavement grief
Yep.
too, of like, I'm 50% happy, I'm 50% sad. That
Mhm.
person's not sitting where they should be. So
Yeah.
I think there are similarities for sure, but in terms of coping, I I felt like I was just a kid when it happened, so I
Mhm.
don't think I coped well. My poor mother, I got on a plane, I flew to Guatemala and went on a service trip before I went to college. I was like,
Amazing.
I'm getting out of here. I need to like I don't even know what that is, my poor mother. Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
So that was if that's coping, I think it was probably avoidance, if you will.
Sounds a little avoidy, but you know what? Fair.
So there was that. And then, I had my college experience. I was processing it. But I guess as a coping skill, I did go to therapy.
Mhm.
I didn't go to grief therapy, which now looking back on it, I probably should have met with like a grief therapist or a grief
Specific.
coach.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but that was, helpful to just let your emotions take up the
Mhm.
space that they deserved. There was a lot of crying, and I will say I think that was a coping skills,
Yeah.
processing the emotion and there was some effort there. I don't think I in hindsight it felt like it cut off immediately, but there was some effort and conversations had,
Mhm.
and then it was like, okay, well, you're just not a safe person anymore. So
Yeah.
in terms of coping otherwise, I mean, there was psychiatric medication to manage the panic attacks.
Oh,
It felt like in that moment, like if someone was like, no, the sky is not blue, Lauren, it's green. I'm like, well, yeah, sure. I mean, nothing makes sense.
right.
So sure, the sky is green now. Like the rug was just like totally pulled out. So I
Mhm.
think when you're talking about grief and then you're talking about traumatic grief, they can look different. And so the coping is different and the symptoms are different. But then becoming a grief therapist,
Mhm.
that's the biggest, most obvious coping skill because I do the work every day.
Yeah.
Every
You are smacked in the face with it, and
Oh, yes. Yes, it's a really good
yeah.
exposure therapy.
And providing people the help that
Yeah.
you perhaps needed, in that
Yes.
dark time too. So, I would love to transition then, perfect segue into how exactly you got into the work that you do now. So, of course, like I was saying, I think none of us are here on accident, or we are definitely, for lack of a better term, inspired by what we have been through, and we just feel this service calling to, help others in the way that we either maybe weren't or that we were, and we're just like, "Wow, I wanna, give back and do this too." So, talk to me a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I wanted to help my family, like, it's
Oh,
exactly what you just said,
yeah.
like, that I could have said your words.
Mhm.
It was like, "Okay, how do I help my family grieve and process what the heck we just went through? Like,
Mhm.
how do I process what the heck I just went through?" And I was an RA at the time in undergrad at AU, and I was thinking about, like, next steps. What do I wanna do?
Yeah.
And I liked people coming into my dorm, like, with their little it wasn't, like, big
Yeah,
stuff. It
yeah.
was like, person's, like, bringing their boyfriend around, and that's not cool, and so it just felt nice to, like, problem solve a little bit, and I had been studying international relations, and then I was like, "I don't wanna be away from my family, I don't wanna be
Mhm.
abroad." So I'm like, "What is international relations and peace and conflict resolution look like domestically?" And then I was like, "Social work."
Yeah.
Social be a nice fit of the skills in undergrad.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I went to social work school at Columbia,
Oh,
Manhattan.
man.
It was like I found my people. I was like, "Wait a second,
Oh.
like, you cry on this back too? You sign your emails with smiley faces?" Like, you do, you know? I really felt like, wow, these are like-minded folks who are, just, like, have such good hearts and wanna help people. So, when I started learning about, let's say symptoms of like personality disorders,
Mhm.
some of the things my father was doing hurt less because I could externalize it like, okay, okay,
Right.
this is what was going on.
Okay.
So that's how that started. And then I was placed at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital for my practicum in end of life care and palliative care.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, and never in a million years did I think I'd end up there.
Mhm.
I couldn't I couldn't get over how meaningful the work was.
Yeah.
It was like I mean, I could not think of a better, like more meaningful way to spend my time.
Mhm.
School was so thoughtful about it. They had a center. It used to be called when I was there for complicated grief.
Okay.
And now it's called the Center for Prolonged Grief.
Mhm.
And so this training of like how you can go in and support these people. So that's how I got started
Okay.
in the clinical grief world.
Right. Oh my god. That palliative care, I mean, I appreciate it. I just my dad was on palliative care as well. I guess my mom kinda technically was, but she was just in the hospital, just not doing well.
Yeah.
But my dad, went through that, went through hospice, and I mean,
Yeah.
kudos to you because it does take a special
Mhm.
person to work
Mhm.
in that line of work, be a death doula. We've had death doulas on the podcast before. And it's,
Yes.
oh my God, to be able to hold that space and care for someone in the last days, weeks, months-ish of their lives, it was there anything about that? I guess my question is like, what was if there was maybe one thing that comes to your mind, like what was the most impactful part of that? Did it just change your perspective in some way or
Yes, like, it honestly, I know this sounds so hokey, but if you give me permission, I'll be cheesy.
obviously?
Literally, it just totally restored the shaky faith that I had
Mhm.
after everything that happened with my dad. I'm like, "Well, who knows about God, and who knows
Oh
this,
my
and
gosh,
this
yeah.
isn't fair, and what the hell?"
Everything's fake news, like
Right.
yeah.
Right, and when I
Mhm.
when I saw, like, nothing else matters,
Yeah,
like, at the end of life, right? It's family
yeah,
and, like, that's it, and
mhm,
love, and that's it, and the experiences that people were having, I was like, "Okay, so for sure everyone's okay and taken care of on the other side, like, for sure that's okay."
yeah,
And I think, like, what a gift
yeah.
as a human and a young woman for that matter, like, just
Mhm,
starting
mhm,
to see like all of this love and just like the hope that like okay we 100% continue on,
yeah,
we just have to figure out what these new relationships look like, and I believe that our loved
me
ones still
too.
need us in that way, like
Yeah,
thinking about this podcast and
mhm,
how you're honoring your family,
yeah,
like I can't even imagine
yeah.
how proud your parents are of you,
Thank
and I'm gonna cry.
you. No, we welcome that on this podcast. Release the emotions, release all the good the good
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
Thank you. No, it's
yeah.
true. It's why I wanna help amplify stories like this because and this is where I think so many people get stuck and we do get so stuck in the weeds of life and what is what matters and what doesn't. And it's like all of the and we're human, right? We have our ego, and I don't mean ego in like such a specific, I mean just like our the
Oh,
larger
yeah.
ego, right? And I that is something that has definitely been put into perspective for me of what if there's anything I find myself and I give myself a lot of grace, again, I'm human, I might get annoyed about certain things, just something my husband does or or my daughter or whatever. And but now I feel like going through all of that, I can take more of a step, a 30,000-foot view of it. And I'm like, is this going to matter in the grand scheme of things? Like, what am I actually upset about? Like, and or, just your kind of conflict resolution with yourself, with other people, whatever it can shift and just change a little bit. Cause you're just like, I don't want to hold on to this. I want to release some of this and whatever. And I just, whether we are grieving whatever we're grieving. And if we are harboring any like guilt or regret over things that we did or didn't do, or any animosity toward a loved one in some way or whatever. And it's so valid that happens, right? That's part of this, like, you're a professional, you can really like speak to this better than I can, but I'm sure it's all part of the process, right? Is to kind of work through those things and work on releasing them the best we can, to just try the point of this podcast, helping us all figure out how to live, a joyful, meaningful life after loss that is not just constantly under this dark cloud, which can be so hard, right? Depending on what loss we've been through. It's, we just feel like we're never going to come out of it, so to speak. So, but it is humbling. I mean, loss is nothing if not humbling, and those are, the lessons, if you will. Like, not that everything requires a lesson in life, but like, it's those realizations and those things that we can take away from these experiences and be like, okay, wow, this has been put into perspective for me, whatever the situation is. And it's, yeah. So I would imagine that's, sitting with someone again in their last days, or caring for them in terms of palliative care in that capacity, like, really just is eye-opening, if nothing else.
So the catty fights and the friend group or whatever, it's like,
Oh
who
my God.
cares, right?
Yeah.
So the instant clarity, I'm like a big believer.
Mhm.
And well, I shouldn't just say I'm a big believer. I'm a big believer in the research and like the confirmation of post-traumatic growth, of like,
Yes.
I feel like that really aligns with your mission too,
Yeah.
Tara, of just like meaning and
Mhm.
joy and on the other side, that it can be both.
Exactly.
And I think that is one of the really important meaning making aspects
Mhm.
of grief in general, of like, oh my God, what a gift to get this instant clarity and perspective. And without the suffering, might not have ever gotten there. Who
Right.
knows? So
Yeah.
so there is that alongside the pain of grief.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Yes, I could not have said that better. I want to shift a little bit into talking about the specialization that you have of helping women process and heal from their traumatic delivery experiences through a grief lens. So,
Yeah.
kind of understanding now how you got sort of into this work from like a professional standpoint. What is it specifically about working with women in this capacity? Of course, other than, or in addition to going through what you have, like, why is that so important for you? And what does that work look like for you?
Oh my gosh, this one just makes my heart happy because, and I hope it's okay. I hope my mom wouldn't mind me saying this, but I have to give her a shout out because it's for my mom.
Oh,
My mom was in that NICU. She
yeah.
delivered at 25 weeks,
Okay.
my twin brothers. And yeah, I don't think there was much. There was a nun actually who was a social worker at the
Oh my
time.
God.
They like prayed with my family and really got them through, a really dark and terrifying and beautiful, I will say too,
Yeah.
time. And so I think that just really informed a lot of my life. I've always been all about family. And then we had like more fracturing in my family. And I'm like, what is going on? So it really felt like a centering
Mhm.
to be able to take care of women and mothers and families who have gone through, a similar traumatic birth experience as my mom and my family. And then, of course, I was a mother baby float social worker at Columbia Presbyterian. I came back after a little stint in Boston. I came back to New York
Yeah.
and back to the hospital where I was working in pal care, but worked on the children's side with mother and
Mm.
babies, and then was in the NICU, antepartum. So all the high risk women were there. So it was for my mom, it was for them. And who doesn't like have such an incredibly soft spot for
Oh my
babies?
God.
Like baby joy and love and like
So
I guess it was
innocent.
right? Like yes, yes.
Oh,
Felt really meaningful to me, that work. So
yeah.
got certification in perinatal mental health from Postpartum Support International,
Mhm.
and then realized, oh my God, there is so much work to be
Oh
done.
my
So
God.
then
Yeah.
started collaborating with local and national OBGYN offices on trauma-informed care
Love that.
with high-risk patients, and yeah, I could go on and on all day
Oh
about
my
that.
God, Lauren, that's amazing. Okay, really quick,
Mhm.
just timeline-wise, did you start all of this work before you had your own traumatic birth experience, or was that after, like
So funny that you say that because I started before.
oh my
I
God.
started before, and then it
Mm.
happened to be. Tell me what's on your
Well,
mind.
no, it's
Yeah.
so funny, there's someone else, that I know that comes to mind, and she also lost her
Yeah.
parents, also lost a sibling, and
Yeah.
she the irony was not lost on any of us, right, in that situation. It's like she started becoming a she's a therapist as well, with grief and loss and everything as her, like, kind of focus, and she was
Yeah.
drawn to that, she got into that work before losing all of her loved
Yeah.
ones, so she was like, "Well, nothing could have prepared me more for that," like, that's
Some like
wild.
weird cosmic something.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
But yeah, that was, and it was always a fear of mine, to be honest. Like I've never wanted anything more in my life to
Mm,
be a mom. That was always like I wanted to be a mom. I knew that. I'll figure out everything else.
yeah,
And always was afraid because my mom had lost my brother's name is Sean.
yeah.
I was always afraid that would happen
Oh,
because of family history. And my pregnancy was not complicated. I mean,
same. Yep.
right? We got sick. I was nauseous, like, sure. At the end of the pregnancy, my blood pressure started to creep up a little, which they
Oh,
had
that's
shared, like, this is
normal-ish, right, yeah.
so I was,
Mm,
monitoring at home, and then things had changed. But yeah, it was before I had my Layla,
that's crazy.
that I got
Oh my
involved.
gosh, if
Yeah.
this is
How
not your soul work, I don't know what is, girl.
I saw that you say like sole purpose, and that just to me seems like my thing of post-traumatic growth. I was like, Tara and I are on the same
Yeah, we
wavelength.
are.
They
Yeah.
resonate.
It's so
Yeah.
true. I that's why I feel called into this work too. I'm just like, well, and also I'm just more out of like spite. Sometimes I'm like, I didn't go through all this for nothing. I'm gonna yell this from the rooftops and talk about it because like, and then you just feel so lit up and fulfilled by the service and by the support that you can provide. So I'm curious, like for you, what does working with these women or with it sounds like maybe hospitals or clarify that for me. Like what does that look like, and what type of, kind of support and guidance are you providing these mamas and families?
Yes. So I'm in my office right now speaking to you. I
Beautiful.
have a private practice called North Star Wellness and
Mhm.
Therapy where moms come in, or it's virtual. So I'm providing one-on-one like therapeutic support
Okay.
for moms who either are expecting, there's a history of loss,
Okay.
maybe they're newly postpartum. I'm so fortunate in the sense that I get to see a lot of women through the whole process
Yeah.
too and support as best I can there. So that's the I would say how I spend most of my professional time
Mhm.
is like as a
Yeah.
therapist. And then I have like a separate consulting business where I work with me and my coworker Caitlin Silverstein, actually, who's also a PMH-C. We do lots of webinars for local OBGYN's office on trauma-informed care and different screening tools that you're looking at for PMADs.
Mhm.
So women don't have to suffer silently if they've experienced, let's say, a traumatic birth, for example,
Mhm.
right? You're more likely to experience anxiety and depression and PTSD
Yes.
postpartum. That makes sense. And so you want to be screening these women
Mhm.
to get the supports that they so deserve. So
Yeah.
so we do that. I also have been really fortunate to do some guest lecturing at NYU. I'm going to be teaching a class
Girl, oh my
next semester,
god.
hopefully in Columbia with Nicole Alston. So I'm like
Insane.
super, like it's like a pinch me, like, what? Me?
Oh,
Things. It's been so wild, Tara. It's
oh,
been so cool.
oh
So
my
I feel very lucky.
yeah. I was gonna I just wanted to say, like, I'm so proud of you, like, not that I'm a person that's, like, allowed to say that to you, but, like
I will take your pride and
that's
I will keep it
oh my
because I
god.
appreciate it, and I'm so proud of you. It's
Mm,
kind of like, I don't know if you could relate to this at all. I grew up like it was like a really great upbringing. I'm Catholic, we go to church.
yeah.
There was that kind of unspoken like okay. And if you experience that, like you're not talking out loud about it and that's a family thing, or like,
Mhm.
yeah, great, you had that accomplishment, but like that's private. Like, don't be rude or don't be. And I feel like I'm at this moment in my professional career, and I think it's because I had my daughter. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, go do
Oh,
that
it
thing you
changes
want to
you.
do. Like,
Yep.
do you feel
Oh,
that way as
yeah.
well?
Yeah, definitely. There's no going back, and it's yeah, we might be, for lack of a better term, kind of conditioned a certain way or whatever. There's definitely a side of my family that errs on the side of like, okay, keep things down, don't talk about things, whatever. Generationally, I've definitely experienced that. And
Mhm.
I've definitely been the one to break out of that, which several other people in my age group and my family are too. But like, yeah, it's just we just can't be silent around these things. It's too important. And thank you so much too for bringing up like the PTSD and things like that. And I want to touch on that for a second because I
Mhm.
it's funny. My husband, we were getting that question. My daughter's like 16, maybe going on 17-ish months old now. And
Mm.
we get the question. We're starting to get the question a lot. Oh, are you thinking about another one? What about another one? Da, da, da. And we that's fine. Our answer currently is no. But it's like kind of a no, but like, yeah, maybe. It's almost more because my husband really wants a boy and he's like, I just don't know. But we're not gonna do like the what's the thing that spins and it gives you like the gender that you want or whatever. We're not doing that. So it's like if we go for number two, it's whatever it's gonna be. He'd be happy with another girl, but, I get it. Having a girl, I'm like, "Yeah, that's my girl." So, he kinda wants his boy. Anyway, but I think about that in that I, like you, it sounds like had a very beautiful pregnancy for all intents and purposes. Yeah, there's a little sickness and things like that, but there's nothing to assume or think that anything was wrong until it was wrong, kind of,
Yes.
and until I had the realization that and again, I talked about this in another podcast episode, so I won't go into a lot of detail here. Everyone can go listen to that separately, but, stopped feeling her move, and, you just as the mother, like, like, instinctively, I knew something was not right, and then thankfully, we went to the hospital when we did and everything, but there's definitely a lot of I'm not gonna say hesitation, but there's a little bit of fear. It's not overwhelming, but maybe it's not
Yeah.
overwhelming right now because 'cause we're just not there, but
Yes.
about maybe doing that again, and, "Okay, is the pregnancy gonna be okay? Am I gonna be monitored well?" And I think I'm already considered high risk now, like, technically speaking, according to my, like, doctors and stuff, they would just, like, go into it checking me more, just to make sure things are okay, and that didn't happen again because our my daughter had oh my gosh, what is it? There's, like, an acronym for it, but it's essentially, like, the blood in the placenta and therefore in
Yep.
her body leaked into mine. So
Yes. Oh
she,
my
like,
goodness.
lost basically all of her blood and had,
My
like,
goodness.
little to basically no oxygen, and that's why she stopped moving and all of the things. So, that it's terrifying to think of that or anything else happening again, and so both of us are like, I don't know if we wanna sign ourselves up for that." And so, again, anyone here listening, whether it's like, maybe not that specific trauma, but just, the idea of being faced with any pain, right? Any additional grief, anything like, and we would knowingly be, again, quote unquote, signing ourselves up for that. That's a little scary. But I'll be very honest, I actually think, and this is going to lead me to my next question. My
Yeah.
husband has worse PTSD around that than I do, even.
Sure.
He
Sure.
there was a
Yeah.
time when we were in the NICU, there was, like, something happening, a baby coming in, there was an emergency C-section, whatever, he literally was like, "Do you mind if I leave? Like, I don't think I can be here, like, I can't be around this," and then I had to and I was like, "Yeah, sweetie, go ahead," but it's
Mhm.
interesting because I have more familiarity, unfortunately, with hospitals, with emergencies, with health issues, whatever, through my parents. He has had very, 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 very little trauma in his life, thankfully, knock on wood. I don't wish that upon him, but I think that's what really, took a toll on him, short
Yes.
and long term with this. So and that's another very big reason he's hesitant and
Mhm.
he's just scared. So,
Right.
in your practice and in the work that you do, of course, as the mother, we're also the ones carrying, and there's you cannot compare what the mother and partner not caring what goes through. But do you see that at all, or is that something that you also work through maybe with some of your clients or just the marriage, the partnership, whatever, in terms of it just affecting the partnership. I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, so it's a trauma bond no
yeah,
matter what
yeah.
happens, it's like a cliche thing to say, but I see it all the time in my
Mhm.
office. It can either, right, birth trauma can really strengthen
Yes.
a relationship,
Mhm.
right? A partnership can really strengthen depending on how supportive and there for each
Yeah.
other partners are. Or I've seen it more times than I like to admit. It's, oh boy, this was the test. This was the ultimate
Oh,
test. We're not there for each other in the way that we needed, or we had different needs and weren't able to communicate them.
mhm.
And you can see, partners splitting up after something that traumatic,
Yeah.
right? So I think like to just validate the acuity of the grief
Mhm.
and the need for support. And there's such a lack of language around like what you even need because you're in survival mode in the
You don't
NICU.
even
And
know, like
right? And
yeah.
so freshly postpartum.
Mhm.
And I also wanted to say too, if it's okay,
Yeah.
I'm so like deeply grateful and happy for you that you had that intuitive, need to go, right?
Just got
I had
chills.
experienced
Yeah.
something similar, but I also just want to create space for some women. I'm thinking of some of my clients
Mhm.
too, where for whatever reason there was no symptoms and there
Right,
was
right.
no
There's, like, nothing they could have done differently, perhaps, or in a way. Yeah.
absolutely nothing
Oh,
that could have been done differently, and you wanna talk about PTSD
oh,
and lack of control, so I just wanna name that too, that,
yeah,
we're among the lucky, fortunate mothers who got a symptom
yeah.
and said, "Okay, let me go get care," and to hopefully not invalidate any of the pain that you and I have been through and what our daughters have been
Of
through.
course.
It's just holding our lost moms like so dear in this conversation too,
Yeah.
that there's, nothing that they could have done and it's not their fault.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that because, with whether it is the loss of a child or whatever the circumstances was, or just any loved one where we feel that guilt and regret, coulda, woulda, shouldas, right? They're so strong, they're so loud, they're so unrelenting.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Liars, right, Tara?
oh my God. I mean,
I call them liars. I just call them liars. Get the heck out
that's a
of
good way of putting
here.
that. I've
Not
never yeah,
yeah,
such liars. Yes, because
liars.
well, I mean, we I think I kind of want to kind of turn this around and ask you this question. Like I look at that and more from my own experience. I never want to project this on anybody, but for me, anytime I've felt that way, it's coming from a place of like maybe looking for a why or something or someone to blame or whatever. And one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn in my own journey is like sometimes there's no reason. There's no
Yeah.
why. There's nothing to cling on to in that way, and I think as humans, we want that, right? Or it helps with closure or whatever, it helps explain something. And in some of these situations, when there's no explanation and I think, like, in my instance, like, that is what is scary potentially doing it again. It's like, "Oh my god, we barely got out of that unscathed." We don't know
Right.
why what happened. So I'm like, "Oh my god, could that happen again?" All these things. So I'm like, if we did do number 2, like, "Oh my god, I gotta be, like, really mentally prepared and in a good place."
We
But
will take good care of you, Tara. We
yeah,
would take good
please.
care
Oh
of
my god, seriously, like oh, okay, here's another thing I wanna ask you, but I'll get to my first question. Do you is that something you also see a lot? I would imagine so. Women or partners, whoever, struggling with, like, the why, the coulda, woulda, shouldas, the what ifs, like, I bet that's a
100.
core of a lot of it.
It's the most of it,
Yeah.
to be honest
Yeah.
with you, the biggest chunk, right?
Mm.
Because you can't heal from something that you haven't
Yep.
processed, right? And if the analogy I always use is like we've got little pieces of the puzzle and we're just desperately trying
Yes.
to put it together to make sense or in a way that we can at least like sleep at night
Yep.
if this makes sense and the risk seems calculated in this way and
Yep.
I would come up with a safety plan for my doctor.
Yep.
But yeah, right? Like I actually I'm a strengths-based therapist,
Mhm.
I'll say. So I actually view that as like super loving,
Yeah.
that that's your mindset, right? Of like, if we're going into this
Mhm.
again, I feel very like this is a responsibility, this is a safety thing. Like that is so loving
Yeah.
that you have that perspective, and it's so maternal, right?
Mhm.
Like a great mom. And it's kind of weird to say because it's like, okay, of course you're such a great mom to your sweetheart, your little daughter, and you're such a great mom to your unborn children as well,
Mhm.
because that thought alone,
Right.
right? You're them
They're not
already, and they're
even
not
remotely created, and I'm already trying to take care of them and make sure they're
yeah.
okay, and everyone's okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and yourself,
Yeah.
right? And that you would be okay emotionally going into this. So I really see that often. And what I do with my clients is we encourage a safety plan. So if you're
Mm.
like me and you were going through the medical records with a fine-tooth comb looking for any and right, all
Yeah.
explanations for why the bleed happened, why the embolism happened,
Yep.
why the abruption happened, why, right? Why did I even need a cesarean? And like all of those things your doctors can meet with you multiple times
Mhm.
for follow-ups, right? It is the 6-week
Yep.
postpartum visit is so inappropriate for a birth trauma survivor. You meet a week after, right? You should be getting follow-ups. And women need to know too, you can request to go see your OB, right? They can figure out what they're going to bill insurance
Right.
and they debrief with you,
Yeah.
right? And do check-in because a, a grieving brain and a traumatized
Yep.
brain are not processing the information anyway. So many of my clients are, okay, I know you told me this 15 times. Doc, tell me
Yeah.
again. What happened? How do I know this won't happen again? Is there anything that we can do proactively and differently to ensure that, to help me with my family planning decisions?
Yes. That's such a great point, and speaking of kind of my own experience, now that I'm, like, reflecting back on this, I got some follow-ups, 1,
Yeah,
maybe 2. It was so robotic, it was like they asked their questions, it was very it felt kinda surface level, there was no meaningful follow-up, ever.
I'm so
And it
sorry.
ju and I'm in California, we have one of the bigger, hospital whatever, healthcare things out here, and
Yes.
yeah, I mean, maybe they told me of some supplemental support that they don't give, but, like, if I needed it, I could go there, whatever, but I was so you're so on your own, and
Yeah.
as the mom and also thank you for bringing up, the traumatized brain and the grief brain and all of that because for the partners as well, especially us moms, and if we can just speak to emergency C-sections for a moment, because we sounds like we both had one, that you just also went through a surgery, massive surgery, that was not planned, and so actually where I wanted to go with this was you mentioned, like, kind of having an emergency plan, and I in my mind, I was like, "That sounds incredible." I
Mhm.
also had a plan in my head. It went
Yes.
the polar opposite of what I was hoping for, which was basically I wasn't, like, married to any plan. I was like, "Okay, vaginal delivery, probably get an epidural. Cool, things will be great." Uh-uh. It went the other direction. So,
Yes.
what would you maybe say to someone listening or just a mom like us, whether it was, whatever the situation ended up looking like, who, had a plan was excited about that plan did not go that way, mourning how it played out. I and even so literally, I know more women whose birth did not go to plan, and you probably do too actually, than the ones that went to plan. Or even if it, like, went to plan, it was more painful than they thought it was gonna be, or there was just something about it that was, like, very traumatic, and whether it was a emergency
Yes.
C-section or not. So, is there any just insight or just words of wisdom that you can provide us with that for, the things that just don't go to plan, which, like, hi, life happens
Yeah.
often.
Thank you for bringing that up. So I want to make a clear distinction between like a birth plan, which is I think what you might be talking
Yes,
about,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, so
a
2 separate things, for
plan,
sure.
and then versus, right, like, okay, post-traumatic birth, planning for maybe another one, like a
Okay,
safety
got
plan
it.
of like
Okay.
very, very
Yes,
different
yes,
in
yes.
my experience
Yeah.
because especially if you're a first time parent,
Mhm.
right? It's kind of like, okay, so here's my birth plan and I want this
And I'm gonna
song
be so
playing.
cute. I'm gonna have a playlist and all the things. Girl, I was literally putting together a freaking playlist. Like, I was just like, "This is like my
Yeah.
people's board of birth." And it was like,
Yes.
let's just go.
Yes, and not to foo-foo, because that's all the love for your angel.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so sweet and it's so wonderful. And then I think just really encouraging women to know, like, you know what? Flexibility,
Mhm.
right? Is really, really important,
Yeah.
right? Knowing that autonomy and control
Mhm.
as much as possible can decrease the experiences of traumatic birth. So
Sure.
being able to, let's say, direct your partner to be your advocate because you're going to be busy, right? So if there are certain non-negotiables that, of course, without an emergency scenario, if they're allowed, like let's say push position or let's say
Yeah.
epidural, those types of things, control what you
Yeah.
can, your non-negotiables, right?
Yep.
But at the end of the day, of course, all birthing people, like we want our babies to
Mhm.
be safe.
Mhm.
That's our goal.
Yep.
And so whether it's cesarean or vaginal,
Mhm.
whatever it is, that flexibility is really important, and holding space for like what you had named.
Mhm.
It is there's the grief and the mourning of the birth experience that we are as women promised growing up, right? Like natural vaginal. I grieved that and I'm still working on that.
Mhm.
Like I know I'm a mom, but she did not enter this world vaginally. And
Right.
like if anyone else said that to me, I would be like, what is wrong with you? You had a cesarean. What are you talking
Yeah.
about? Like that's birth. And in my head, I'm like, it's just not how I thought
Yeah.
it would go.
Yep.
And I'm so grateful, and I feel like that's really important to talk about. Like,
Mhm.
women who have their babies who experience birth trauma are so grateful, and we're grieving, and it's okay.
Yep.
It's okay to take up space,
Yep.
you
We
know?
hold space
I
for
just
both. Yeah.
aim that for people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and just again, there's so much around, yeah, the surgery, just all the things around it. We didn't,
Yeah.
sign up for that, and so it can just we can feel so robbed of it, and it's just I think back, and I was presently thinking this too, even when I was pregnant with her. I was like, I almost don't care what happens in the in the birth. I can go through all the work. I just want her to have a peaceful, loving, calm as possible entry into this world. And it was the opposite. And I think that is the part that I sort of mourned the most out of I didn't want that for her. And I've processed
Absolutely.
that and I'm like, she's okay. She's thriving. She's adorable. She laughs. Okay. Like she's fine. I've released a lot of that because, and it's what you just spoke about. I just want to call this out because thank you for bringing this up. The control part. It's not like, some of us might want control over every little bit and thing, but like nothing like giving birth will make you realize, how out of control you actually are. But controlling the things that you can and whatever autonomy and decisions you can make and keeping to those as much as possible, like it really does help. And so I just want to, validate and acknowledge anyone here listening who, whether it was through a birth experience or anything else, having those capacities to like make a decision or things just get overridden and you're kind of more or less without your consent. Like it's just that's hard. That's it's so difficult, and you feel like you're just at the mercy of God or the universe or whatever, higher powers that be that you believe in, and there's, like, little more helpless feeling around that, and it's a lot to
That's
cope
me.
with.
Absolutely. And I just want to even like acknowledge too, I feel like this is a really important like thing to say here too, that who would have ever thought in 2025, and hopefully this isn't fear mongering. This is
Yes.
more, I hope, like to install some courage to be your advocate
Mhm.
during this process, that like the the rates of traumatic births and the rates of our babies that are passing away, and especially for women of color who are more likely to die during
Mm.
childbirth, like anyway. I mean, it's just there's a lot of really important work to be done, right? As like we're not a developing country, we're the
Right.
United States of America.
Yeah.
Like we have
What is
to
going
get
on?
our policymakers, we have to get our leaders, and there's so many great, amazing movements
Yeah.
and people, working on that. So if anyone's listening and they feel that kind of call to action too, of like, I survived this or I experienced this, how do I continue to make meeting? How do I sign up?
Mm,
You can for dimes, you can write to your policy,
great
you
point.
know, petitions. There's so many therapeutic things that you can do to help that feeling of helplessness.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for mentioning that because it just helps us feel a little more empowered in it and like we can make a difference, despite whatever the outcome was or whatever our circumstances was. I want to just quickly, as we kind of start to wrap up, talk about just the NICU experience and that in and of it, because it's like, oh my gosh, as if the birth wasn't, traumatic enough. Then you have the NICU stay, depending on how long it was. I know we were talking about that a little bit before we hopped on, and my daughter was in there for like 18 or 19 days. And for me personally, and it sounds like you were too, as far as like recovering from a C-section after that, I'll speak for myself. I didn't get to recover in the comfort of my own home. Literally, we went from I was like released from the hospital the next day. I
The next
Yeah, the next day. Yeah, because so my daughter, high level kind of what happened, gave birth like a Saturday afternoon. They She was transferred that night to UCSF, which is a phenomenal hospital in Oakland, California, which we're so fortunate that she was able to get in there. But they had she did 2 blood transfusions at the hospital we were at, but they did not have the ability to care for her in the way that she needed. She needed another
Yes.
transfusion with, like, plasma and a bunch of stuff. She was
Yes.
not well, and that's the other thing, I was getting, like, stitched up, and then my husband was, like, in the NICU. They're, like, trying to keep her alive, and they're like, "Here, can you sign this paper to approve the blood transfusion?" Like, he's like, oh my god, this poor man. So, she was transferred that night. So, I did not get to hold her for 2
Oh,
days, like, after she was born, and so I can't even remember if I don't think we even went home. I think my husband did to, like, get me stuff, and then we literally went from the hospital to an Airbnb. Like,
yeah.
that was 15 minutes away from that hospital, and we were there for maybe about a week, and then so she was in and out of 3 different NICUs before we were able to bring her home for a variety of reasons
Mhm.
that I won't get into. So, it was just the recovery too. I mean, I remember like, the first few nights I was, producing milk and everything. And then, so I was up every 3 hours pumping and then there night sweats and I was shaking and all these, and I was like, what is life? Like, and then desperate to see our new baby because I hadn't held her, like I said. So it was just, there was that. And then I would definitely say those first several days were the worst, just kind of making sure she was okay and stable. And we were
Yeah.
just constantly watching the monitors and learning what all of
Yes.
the different levels and things meant. And you lived and died by these monitors, right? And the beeping and everything, it's like talk about PTSD. It's like, that's the kind of thing that, might kind of relive in our minds a little bit. But what I ultimately wanted to ask you in terms of the work that you do and women or again partners whoever that you work with is like what does specifically that like NICU trauma look like and how do you help women cope through that because I almost don't want to like separate like the birth from the NICU but like in my mind I almost have had to compartmentalize those two different
Yeah.
types of grief because I was just like okay the birth was like whoo okay got to process that and then those 3.5 weeks or whatever that she was, out of our care, we were driving every day to see her, we were exhausted, I almost it's funny, I almost, like, think it helped with my healing of the C-section a little bit because I had her to focus on. I was like, "Oh, I have to get up, I have to shower, I have to get dressed."
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah.
relax, really. It was a crazy time.
That's so insane. So I just want to reflect this back at you for a
Yeah.
second. My therapist moved
Please, I
on.
love this.
Right? So you just said that you feel like that helped with the healing, the fact that you were not able to rest.
Yeah.
And what do you need after a C-section? Rest
Generally
and
rest. Yeah.
right? But so this is, and not to invalidate, because I wholeheartedly believe you, and I had that same experience. I was waddling down like the NICU hallway, like they were like, get in the wheelchair. I was like, you need to go away.
Okay.
I'm going to see my daughter, like you. But truly, like the bond, right, between
That healed me.
parents and like a baby. No, but I want to
Mhm.
highlight how amazing you are as a mom because that was your drive the whole
Oh,
time
yeah.
and that was your North star and you were okay and she was okay,
Yep.
but we didn't know, just to name it and not minimize
Yeah.
it, we didn't know if she was going to be okay,
Yep.
right, Tara? We
Absolutely.
didn't know. Layla was going to be okay.
Mhm.
I think to speak to your question, like the specific grief that can come up
Mhm.
for parents in the NICU is that lack of control too, right?
Oh,
Like, so it
utterly.
complicates grief because it's an out of time loss, right? This is like a fresh newborn, like who quote unquote should be robust, should be crying, should be that like
Yep.
we should have had skin to skin. We deserve skin to skin and we
Yes.
didn't get
Oh
skin
my
to
God, the one
skin.
thing I didn't
And
get that I wanted. I was yeah,
right,
again, robbed.
all of these things. And so what I do with a lot of my clients is we'll literally write like a trauma narrative of
Mm.
either birth experience and the NICU experience or just the NICU experience, because there's a lot that needs to be pieced together because our brain protects us and blocks out a whole
Oh,
lot.
yeah.
And either partners come to session and add in, or grandmas come to session to add in, right? Like
Mhm.
if fortunate enough to have a support person with them in the hospital in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's different for everybody, but your risk of developing a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder
Mhm.
if you have a NICU stay skyrockets,
I can see
understandably,
why I was yeah,
because,
I was gonna say.
well, what's anxiety? It's a lack of control.
Yeah.
What's, the NICU, what you're talking about, all of those alarms, it's hypervigilance
Yes.
trauma,
That's
right? And
exhausting.
so, like, for me, my little one is going to be 2 in July.
Mm.
And I still don't sleep the full night because I'm still checking to make sure she's breathing. And I'm a specialized therapist, right? Like, so the effects are real.
Yeah.
They're absolutely real. But it's a lot of clinical exposure therapy
Yeah.
of like trusting your intuition, a lot of safety affirmations
Mhm.
with NICU grief of like, okay,
Yeah.
and if your angel is here now. I mean, I say angel
Yeah.
to all babies,
I
but if
love
your
that.
angel, it just feels
It just
true
feels
for
so
me.
much
I
better.
don't
Yeah, let's just, I'd love to
yeah.
name him that. Mhm.
So we just try and like
Oh.
let our children reassure us
Mhm.
that they're okay,
Mhm.
great advocates now. But I'll also hold space too for a lot of these women, my mom being one of them. I
Yeah.
guess she's a member of both
Yeah,
clubs, right?
totally.
To be a part of
Ugh.
and never want to be a member of this club.
No.
A lot of women, right, whose babies do pass
Yeah.
away in the NICU, and how we honor them and how we create and foster that continued bond,
Mhm.
right? The mothering doesn't stop ever. The love doesn't stop ever. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the work, the grief work, is making that meaning that way. And that's
Mm.
one of the greatest privileges of my job.
Oh my god, that's amazing. Last little bit here, I want to talk about your Restoring You workbook that you have. Yeah, I wanted to bring this up because this is, I think, just a great way to kind of like end this. It's just this beautiful guide to, helping heal after birth trauma. So, do you want to just talk about that really quick and what that
Oh my
is?
gosh, I feel like you're such a hype girl. Thank you,
I
Tara, for
am.
bringing up my
I try
I
and be.
can tell I put like my blood, sweat, and tears into this workbook. I hope that it's meaningful for people. I've gotten some beautiful feedback
Oh,
about it.
good.
But basically, if I had to put it into like a sentence, it would be like, okay, if you have no clue where to start, what the next right step is. I
Mhm.
survived birth trauma, now what?
Right.
Wanted to make this guide because not everyone has time for therapy, not everyone can afford
Yeah.
therapy, not everyone has access. And so this is like a self-guided tool with questions from a perinatal specialist and
Mm.
therapist to get on the road to processing what you and your little one just endured as a first step. And then I'm always so happy to support anyone, through the workbook. If it's, I live in this state and I need a therapist, like you don't have to come see me. There's an army of specialists
Mhm.
who can support you. And so I would also encourage people to reach out, and I'm happy to connect anyone.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I no one should be without support in these instances. Like it's too important for us moms. Like we carry so much and I feel like there was definitely a time too and this is no knock against my husband, but like there were definitely times throughout the time she was in the NICU specifically that I was like I am literally the one holding everything together right now. Like I felt like I couldn't break down or grieve or whatever like, we kinda went off and on, like, he was okay, and then I wasn't, and then I was okay, and then he wasn't, and it was like, "Oh my god, is anyone okay around here?" Like, it's just like I laugh now, but, like, at the time, It was so intense. So, and whether it is coping with a situation that already happened, or it's like what we were mentioning earlier, considering having another one, and just mentally kind of that preparation from there. I'm just so happy that there are people out there like you that, can hold that space, can, for lack of a better term, set people up for success in that way, and really, just have such a sacred space to process, to heal, to potentially go into it again with like a strong, like, "Oh, okay, everything's going to be okay" mindset, and like what that looks and feels like. And it's a complex process. It really is, like,
Oh, yeah. Well, human beings are so complex,
aren't we
right? And so
though? Yeah.
it would be. But yeah, there's a whole army of us. There's a whole army of us. So you reach out to support and you'll be well taken care of. What was the other thing that I was going to say? I still say mom brain. I don't know how long I get to say
I'm
that to
getting,
her.
let's, I
Me
go
too.
with it.
If I think of it later, we
I
could
love
always.
it. Lauren, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to work with you or just reach out and get to know you, chat with you, follow you, wherever, where can they find you?
Oh, thank you. Okay, so Instagram is Sessions with Lauren. Yeah, or they could find me on Psychology Today, Lauren Hunter.
Amazing. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much for your time, for your insight. I love having true, like, grief mental health professionals on, just to shed light. And again, these conversations, I think that they just make people feel more validated and feel less alone, no matter what we've been through, whether someone here is listening has not been through birth trauma or whatever. Like, there's so many things I think in this conversation that we touched on that can apply to a lot of different types of grief, living losses,
Yeah.
dead losses. I didn't think of a good way to word that, but it's so true, and it's a lot.
Thank you for this
Yeah,
space.
you're
Thank you
so
for the
welcome,
space.
Lauren. Thank you for joining us today. I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog, more coping tools, ways to work with me, and so much more. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Losses Become Gains, and on Instagram and TikTok at Life with Grief Podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and share this episode or this podcast with someone who could use it too. And remember to always keep asking yourself, how will I turn my losses into gains today? I'll catch you in the next episode.